I've got a slide to kind of describe why I'm qualified. And so this particular slide shows how, look at that, how popular I am. That's fabulous. I have a ski run named after me at Big Sky. So that qualifies me, right? Well, that and a few years ago, I lost a popularity contest, and now I'm president of the East Canyon Ferry County Water and Sewer District. So that also qualifies me. Thanks, Paul, for helping me with that. So that, and I have had some success with some businesses. I've had a retail business, a wholesale business, some construction, some movings, all sorts of fun stuff. And in some of those, I've used debt and have been able to use it successfully. So anyhow, this next slide, I want to talk about what is debt. And debt is strictly a tool. And so if you've got some screws that you want to put in, do you want to use a hammer or do you want to use a screwdriver? Well, it seems obvious to me that the screwdriver is going to do a better job. Can you use a hammer? Sure, you can. And if you've got nails, can you use a screwdriver? I've done it. The outcome isn't always pretty, but can you accomplish it? Yes. Does it do as good a job? No, it just doesn't. And so debt is a tool. And so we want to use this as a tool when it's used properly. So on the next slide, I want to talk about the proper use of debt. And so this one, that's a great way to use debt, right? A jet ski. How about a family vacation? How about some new clothes? How about going out to dinner or impressing your wife or girlfriend or any other things that you're going to use debt to acquire something that depreciates? That's interesting. So I'm going to argue, and I think most smart people that talk about money, not me, but most of these other folks, they're going to say, hey, don't use debt for something that's not going to increase your income. So now, the next slide, we're going to talk about what is good debt. What can we spend money on and use debt? And so this is just a picture of a duplex. And so that's one of the ideas. And so if you've got some income-producing assets, and I'm real technical on income-producing assets, and it's not necessarily a depreciating asset. So a duplex, while you can technically take some depreciation on it, it's not a depreciating asset. It's going to increase in value over time. And if you use a little bit of debt, you can get into this and have someone else pay your mortgage off. It's kind of a neat idea. There's another way to look at using debt properly. At one point in time, I owned a retail business, and this was back in the 80s and 90s. And we would buy our product 6 months in advance of when we needed it. And that was just how the life cycle would go. And we would take shipment on the product. And at that point in time, interest rates were much higher than today. And I recall the credit manager from one of our companies called and said, hey, it's the end of the month and I get a bonus if you pay your bill early. And for every month you pay your bill early, I'll give you 2% off of that bill. Okay, now I'm not real smart, but I'm adding this up and I'm thinking, okay, so annually for 12 months, if I got 2% a month, that's 24%. Well, that's a no-brainer. I can go to the bank and I can get money for 10% at the time. And so I ran down to the bank and I said, hey, I need to borrow some money. I don't remember what it was, how much, it didn't matter. So I borrowed some money and paid the bank 10%. I took my big discount right up front off of what I owed. And then every time I sold my product, I had some extra cash and I'd pay the bank down. So I wasn't even paying the bank the full amount. So it was a terrific deal, was a great use of debt, and it actually made money for me. So it actually made sense. So those are just a couple of the ideas of what is good debt and when is it appropriate. There's a ton of really good examples. So the next slide, if you've got $1 million investment and you've got an 8% return on this thing, and there's a couple of different philosophies on how to look at it. One extreme is no debt, zero debt. No, we're not going to do debt. Never, 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 never. How many people are going to write a check for $1 million here? Yeah, lots of us. So the other extreme is, hey, I'm going to borrow everything I can borrow. I'm going to borrow 100% of this or 90% of this. And based on that, my returns sure look good. I've got 10% equity. My return on investment, actually, my zeros are wrong. I go to an 80% versus an 8%. So those needed to be percentages. So an 80%. However, if you've got that much debt, and we all remember 2008, 2009, 2010, what happened? The market tanked. All of a sudden, this $1 million property is worth what? $600,000? Some places less than that. So now you've got a $600,000 property that you still owe $90,000 or $900,000 on. Ouch, you're going backwards. You're giving this thing up. It's painful. You can't afford to rent it for what you need no one will pay, because the guy next door who doesn't owe what you owe can rent his place cheaper. And so I've got a different approach, and that's this next slide, and that's a balanced debt. And so I take an approach that I'm going to be a high of around 65% of debt to equity, and I'm going to ride it down to around 40%. And then I want to re-leverage. And if I stay in that zone, then I'm not stressed. And when we have a downturn in the market, I can still afford to have the cheapest rent out there. And if I have the cheapest rent, I'm going to keep it rented. And then I'm going to be able to make the payments, and eventually I'm going to have the thing paid for. Or I write it down to where I'm about a 40% debt, 60% equity, and then I'm going to borrow money against that and buy another property. And then there's a snowball effect. I like real estate. So in fact, as we talk a little bit about real estate, what are some of the different kinds of returns that you can get on investment? I know if I put money in the bank, I'm getting a lot. I'm sure you guys are getting a lot in your savings accounts, 0.00001, something like that. I mean, it's really awesome. And if you go get a CD, you're going to get like 1%, I think, on a CD. Bonds, they're somewhere 3 to 5%, depending on the grade of bond. I know there's some towns in California that might be a little higher, but you better be careful on those. Stocks, there's some folks that do really well and get maybe 8, 9, 10% on stocks consistently. Maybe some people even do better than that. If you own a business, most business people are looking in that 15 to 20%. They've got some risk involved, and that's what they're looking at, and that seems to make some sense. Private equity firms, they want 30%. It's just that's what they want when they're going to invest in a company. They're looking for a 30+% return on investment. And of course, you got the angel funding guys and that lucked out and invested in Mark Zuckerberg, and those guys did exceptionally well. And so there's kind of your extremes. When I do real estate and I do this kind of debt, and we look at my returns on investment, and I'm getting 23%, 13%, somewhere in there, and we haven't talked about the appreciation, which that might be a couple more percent that you can add on. The depreciation, which is what Uncle Sam lets you have, but it's cash in your pocket. So there's some advantages to it. So how much is the right one for you? I guess that's something you guys get to answer for yourselves, but a balanced approach seems to make a lot of sense. So thank you guys for everything.